thinks all kinds of nice things about it. And Este's been kind enough not to spill all the beans about our childhood, various things that happened. That being said, I should correct Rabbi Marcus on one count. That I have no take per se on science and technology and Torah. I'm simply doing my best within my limits to try to articulate the Lubavitcher Rebbe's position on these matters. The last Lubavitcher Rebbe had, technically, he worked as a scientist before he worked as a rabbi, as an engineer precisely. And those who are genuine scientists, not merely those who know a little bit about it, but genuine scientists and mathematicians in many fields, walked away from encounters with the Rebbe with quite a degree of awe at the extent of his knowledge. I mention this because sometimes a claim can be made that people speak about science without truly understanding it. Not only did the Rebbe understand science, he didn't live a bifurcated world. He didn't conceive of, the world of science and technology, or for that matter, literature, and the world of Torah. He saw of necessity that it has to be one. And the way he described it, essentially, there's the understanding of what God did, which is science, and then there's the understanding of its deeper inner purpose, which is Torah. Science, of course, is always evolving and always changing because it's a product of human intelligence, which is always evolving and always changing. Now, there are really two sets of questions. One is the relationship of various ideas and themes in the Torah to various understandings that we have as to how the universe works and to how whether it be biology, geology, or astronomy, how they work, and what Torah has to say, as well as perhaps the understanding that very often there are core ideas in the Torah that are best understood with a thorough understanding of science and vice versa. That being said, the great existential questions of scientific knowledge and Torah knowledge we explored this afternoon at a lunch and learn, and I'm perfectly happy to revisit them. But based on what Rabbi Marcus asked of me, I think we want to look a little bit at the question of evolving and developing technology and the Torah, and I'm going to say a few words about that, and then we can of course circle back to the premise of science and Torah in general. With science and Torah, the Rebbe's position, and I believe that this is indicated in Maimonides and all the great thinkers who in each generation embraced the corpus of human knowledge as it was known at the time, that there can fundamentally be no contradiction between science and Torah. I can tell you that a certain therapy is possible. I can tell you that the statistical odds for a given event are possible. But the Torah is going to have to apply, shall we say, a spiritual, moral, divine metric to that known statistic. In other words, how do you deal with scarce medical resources? What's the difference between palliative care and accelerating someone's death? Is accelerating someone's death wrong? And so on. All good questions that have been covered in the past and certainly are worth looking at. That's sort of one set of ideas that deal with science, in the sense technology and Torah. And again, it's always going to be that we look at our best present understanding, since a human being can only work by what they know, and God knew that when God gave us the Torah. And that is why sometimes halachic rulings change. The halacha doesn't change. But for example, if you look in the Code of Jewish Law as edited and updated by the Alter Rebbe, Rabbi Shlomo Yaffe, late 18th, early 19th century founder of Chabad. He basically says, any injury from the lips inward is worthwhile to break the Shabbat over. But we would not today break the Shabbat over a sore in the mouth, because most of us know that it's either viral and will go away, and if it's bacterial, it can be treated. High fevers are taken, very high fevers are taken seriously, but an ordinary fever might not be such an issue, but it was an issue when conceivably it could be an infection. All infections were untreatable except by making the person comfortable and doing everything that could be done to strengthen the immune system and its response. And occasionally there were various antibiotic properties to various herbal remedies. But in the end, the scepter of an infection was far more serious than it is today, though we do today have resistant infections. But nevertheless, we would have been much quicker to break the Shabbat for a fever in 1800 than we are in 2016, for obvious reasons. The halacha did not change, but the capacity of science to tell us what is a sakana, what is a nature, and what doesn't change. The Torah never changes. Our set of information that we have to act upon does change. And this is one of the key issues at hand. So if we move forward to the question of technology in Torah, essentially there are three problems. One we talked about last week, which is when technology makes it possible to bring things together that naturally do not occur together, they're not synthesized together. Or to separate things that historically were never separated. So now, for example, we can in theory talk about growing vital organs, which from stem cells or creating them artificially and so on. I think we're very close indeed to the first artificial pancreas. We have artificial hearts that are functional for a period of time. So as those things happen, this changes, for example, the idea that the complete non-function of the heart defines death. It's only a symptom. I'm sorry, I'm recording here, but I should have turned off the sound, which I will. I apologize. So if you think about it, what happens is that you have issues of technology. That what's changed is not the fundamental law. It's not that the heart stopping makes a person dead. It's that historically the cessation of all autonomous heartbeat caused death to happen pretty quickly. Now we have heart-lung machines, now that we have artificial hearts and so on, it clearly is not necessarily a sign of death, and so on and so forth. The second issue has to do with the creation of entirely new entities that did not exist, and how do we apply halacha to them, whether they be artificial forms of life or something as simple as a body of knowledge that doesn't exist on paper or in people's memories, which creates questions about copyright, different from the question of copyright in the 16th and 17th century when Jews pioneered it, because that dealt with selling physical books. Now it's a much more subtle question about ownership of ideas that may never be put into paper. They remain as if it were in the ether. They remain in the information space. And any object thereon is merely a symbolic representation of this material, which exists in a space that doesn't exist really in physical terms. So all those changes demand that we relate to them from a Judaic perspective, and it's my contention that since indeed Torah, and when I say Torah, I mean both the oral and written law, and its interpretation function in a conceptual space, in a goal-oriented space. Most law responds to the area. We see the scramble now with the whole FBI Apple thing, where we're trying to create law to deal with a situation that didn't exist not that long ago. And in truth, Torah, as we shall see, probably already has an answer, because Torah is concept-driven. The idea of Torah is to define the ideal society and to move towards it. So a definition of an ideal and a set of values as applied to law are far more flexible than a system which is rigidly statutory and responds only to requests for more statutes. And I'll be happy to give examples of that, but I think this is sort of a good overview, and because it's an open forum at this point, I'd really like to lay it down and ask you to, you collective plural, as they say in inner city Philadelphia, or they used to, yous in plural. There's no plural you, but in Philadelphia, yous means many individuals. So if yous can come up with we'll come up with some questions. I may not know the answer, but we can together work at trying to understand them. And the idea Rabbi Marcus had for an open forum was precisely this, that we have an opportunity to address what interests us, so go for it.
I'll go first, and just to say that I'm glad my wife is not here to see that I forgot to thank our host.
No, this is all my honor. I mean that sincerely. You, by the way, are the first official guests we've had in our home. Thank you. Since moving in the early fall.
Wow.
It's been under
We should say another l'chaim.
It's been under construction.
We should say Shnechianu.
So I can't imagine a more blessed way to inaugurate my home than to have a chacham and my chaverim from Chabad. So thank you very much.
And also I discovered that I'm in the presence of the scion of a great rabbinic family.
What's more important is that my personal interest since I've retired has been Talmud and science. So
Perfect.
This is for sure.
A man after my own heart, what should I tell you? So let us say l'chaim.
L'chaim. To you all.
What's in front of you is fine. I don't, we don't take, Chassid doesn't take himself.
Look for an enabler.
You'll figure it out. Meanwhile, okay, so go ahead, Rob, so you want to, just.
That's it, I just wanted to,
Okay, so, please.
should be sitting here.
No, stick to the wall. Do you want to copy?
Well, so can we address, I think the premise in the email was the Torah's viewpoint on the privacy of the individual versus, in the specifics of the case of a phone, right, the security of the greater good.
Well, now, I mean, if we talk about this specific iPhone, we should say that there is no concept of an estate in Jewish law. There is the concept of inheritance, but there's no concept of an estate. In other words, the moment someone dies, their heirs, designated or otherwise, become the owners of the property. They can live as an estate if they share it and don't divvy it up. But there's no concept of an estate, and furthermore, no one has any obligations or rights once they die. So since both of the miscreants from the San Bernardino case are dead, they have no rights. So there is no issue of the privacy. Furthermore, since they were established murderers, and the concern is they were networked with others, they have no right of privacy. In other words, the right of privacy, as we will see, we'll explore it as much as you want to, is extremely powerful in Jewish law. But it doesn't trump a danger to life, because nothing trumps a danger to life except the obligation to give one's life rather than serve idols. But other than that, there aren't too many things that trump the issue of a danger to life. That's first of all. The second aspect to this question has to do with the larger question, which is the issue of whether, as to what the FBI is asking for, what Apple says maybe we can't do, but if we could, we don't want to do it, and where that might lie in the province of halacha and Jewish values. I should make a point that a lot of people write about halacha and modern issues and typically look at halacha as it exists today and apply that to modern issues, which is a wonderful thing to do. But that being said, halacha has not had a voice, even in Israel, in these matters for a long time. And the more fundamental question to me, that's of much more use, is what are the fundamental value systems of halacha? So if halacha was being updated, how would those because we're constantly applying the systems and ideas to new situations. So in the area of things like end-of-life issues and transplants and genetic engineering, people come to us and ask questions to us, right? So the halacha is being updated because it's relevant. All the laws of Shabbat and technology, all the laws of kosher and technology. But when we're talking about things like privacy law and the like, halacha has no voice, so we tend to say, well, this is what it says in the books, rather than asking the question, what are the fundamental driving premises that drive what it says in the books? Because if rabbis had to rule today, just as they have moved forward and applied ideas related to kosher and to matters of medicine and life and death forward to new situations based on the fundamental driving ideas, so too here. So there have been many good articles already in the last 36 hours, 48 hours, about sort of the fundamental laws as they exist. I'm interested in what are the fundamental values of the halacha, which would indicate if as Jews we speak to society, which we must, what are the values of the Torah as they apply universally. And I should say there's a very famous Ramah, Rav Moshe Isserles, 16th century, wrote the glosses on the Code of Jewish Law that bring Ashkenazic practice. The Code of Jewish Law was written by Rabbi Yosef Karo, who was from Spain, who brought up primarily Sephardic practice. So he writes in one of his responsum that any ideas in Jewish law that are developed in the Talmud and the subsequent codes and responsa that relate to behaviors that are demanded by the Noahide laws, which, as you know, they're not 7 laws for humanity, but 7 categories which